everybody! So by now over 100,000 people have seen my video about the different shapes of gaps in the back of your corset and what it means. And many people believe that if you have anything but a straight parallel gap down the back, that means that it's going to break the corset. But this is actually incorrect. So as long as the bones are not being bent or twisted in any way, your corset isn't going to be ruined. So if your corset is making a V shape or the inverted shape, some people call it an A shape, the bones are not parallel, but they're still pretty much in a straight line and they're not being bent. What it means is that the corset is not the best shape for you. I call it a corset body mismatch. But will your corset fall apart after a few weeks of wearing it like that? Not likely. What will happen is your corset may become seasoned this way and your ribs and hips aren't going to be changing dramatically anyway, so there's no reason that you should be wearing it any other way in the first place. Also, it's important to note that some corseteers and designers, they sometimes deliberately draft a corset to have that V shape in the back. And it's not my personal favorite look, but you see it all the time on the back of wedding dresses, and sometimes burlesque artists will ask for a V shape in the back deliberately, maybe to echo the line of the outfit or to show off a cute modesty panel. And actually, Elizabethan stays or pairs of bodies, they were often drafted to have a deliberate V gap in the front to show off the decorative stomacher. So the rules of the shape of a corset gap are not really hard and fast. I also sometimes see people wearing a corset with the V shape or the inverted V shape, and people sometimes stop them and tell them that they're wearing the corset incorrectly, and this also isn't true. If your corset is too small at the top and you try to force the corset closed and reduce your own underbust measurement, you may find that it's more difficult to take a deep breath. You will almost certainly get some flesh spillover or muffin top. And in the opposite case, if your corset is too small at the bottom, it has this shape, and you try to force it closed and reduce your hips, you may feel some uncomfortable pinching or numbness in your hips or your bum or your legs, or you could actually have long-term nerve damage when you trap the nerves between your iliac crest and the rigid corset. So having a gap in this shape, it does not mean that you're actually wearing the corset incorrectly. It's no fault of the wearer. What they're doing is that they're lacing it so that it's comfortable and it's not going to cause them pain or injury. But the corset itself is not the optimal shape for that person's body. The gap shapes that you do need to worry about are the ones that look like parentheses. So if they're shaped like this or the opposite, like this. So if you have, say, the top and the bottom of the corset touching and you have a big gap at the waistline, or the opposite where the gap is echoing the hourglass shape of the corset. And it's kind of unfortunate that so many online sellers, they lace the corset on the mannequin to have a smaller waist and it's bigger at the top and the bottom. And what this does is, one, you can't see the true silhouette of the corset, and two, it kind of encourages those less experienced lacers to lace their corset that way. Or it teaches them that that's somehow the right way to do it because they don't see the corset being laced with a parallel gap from top to bottom. So I would like to see more sellers lacing a corset on the mannequin having an even gap from top to bottom so that you can see the true shape of the corset, and it also teaches people how to lace their corset properly. So the gap shapes where your bones are literally bending this way or this way, this means that not only does your corset not fit right for your body or your experience level, but also the bones might be loose in their channels, they might be twisting in their channels, and what can happen is the bone may permanently kink or bend, which weakens the bone, and it can be uncomfortable for you. It makes it more likely for the bone to pop out of their channels, and also the bones are there to support the grommets, and if those bones are twisting and bending, they're not doing their job properly, and it makes it more susceptible for the grommets to pop out later on. So this is the shape gap, this way or this way, that causes the damage to the corset, not so much the straight V shape or the inverted V shape gaps. Those ones, they don't cause that much damage to the corset. So with that out of the way, let's move on to some other fitting issues. I've been asked a lot lately about flaring, when people try on a corset and it just sort of gapes away from your body, and this is actually normal and it's to be expected. In fact, if you are seasoning your corset at just a couple inches reduction and you're not getting some flaring at your underbust and at your hips, something is wrong and the corset is probably not curvy enough for you. Most people buy a corset that's curvier than their bodies. This is often the point of corseting. So a well-fitting corset is supposed to have a smaller waist than your natural waist, but it will have an underbust measurement that's the same size as your underbust naturally, and it will have a hip measurement that's the same size as your natural hips. So this way, when you're trying to cinch down in the corset, it's not trying to reduce the size of your underbust, waist, and hips simultaneously. It's only reducing your waist while gently supporting the ribs and their hips, so you don't get flaring, but you also don't get pinching or spillover. So many off-the-rack corsets out there, they're not curvy enough for people's bodies. And I myself have reviewed some corsets in the past that were not curvy enough to close all the way on me because the rib and hip measurements of the corset were smaller than my own. And you'll notice in these videos that I don't actually force the waist of the corset to be smaller and leave the underbust and hip measurements alone so that it gives me this shaped gap. I actually just leave a humongous gap in the back of the corset. Because one, I want to show the true silhouette of the corset. I don't want anybody to think that I'm giving an optical illusion and making the corset look curvier than it actually is. And secondly, I don't want to ruin the corset. So remember that a well-made corset, it's only supposed to reduce the size of your waist, not your underbust and not your hips. So let's imagine the proper scenario. Let's say that you have a very curvy corset and it's supposed to reduce your waist 4 to 6 inches, and you're not reducing quite that amount yet. You're still seasoning your corset. If the corset is not closed in the back, it's perfectly normal to have the top and bottom flare away from your body at this stage because the corset is designed to fit when it's closed. So you kind of have to keep your eye on the end result as opposed to what the corset is doing right now at a very gentle reduction. But in the meantime, does this mean that you should lace the top and the bottom of the corset tighter, keep the waists more loose so that the back of the corset looks like this? Well, that would be a good way to make the bones by the grommets bend and twist in the back and potentially eventually ruin the corset. So I would personally not advise doing that. So if I am seasoning or training down in a corset that has a really dramatic waist reduction, I just deal with the gaping or the flaring at the ribs and the hips. I mean, I don't like the way that it looks, but it can be hidden. I can wear sweaters or jeans under the corset to add more bulk and fill it out, or I'll just wear the corset underneath my clothes so I don't have to see it. And I mean, it feels weird, it feels a little bit wobbly, but I just remind myself this is just a temporary state, and when I'm able to train down further or when I'm done seasoning and can lace it tighter, then that flaring will just go away. So what happens if you can completely close the corset all the way from top to bottom in the back and the ribs and hips are still flaring away from your body? Well, if you feel that you're able to cinch smaller and you want to train down further, then exchange the corset for a smaller size. But if you have no interest in having a smaller waist, then see if you can get your corset exchanged for a less curvy one. So maybe the wasp waist isn't for you. Maybe you would prefer a more gentle hourglass or a modern slim silhouette. And there's actually nothing wrong with this. If you don't want to lace down further, nobody's making you. And this is why there are so many different silhouettes and different styles of corsets for different people. So I hope this clarified things quite a bit with regards to my old corset gaps video, and I hope it enlightened you about some other common fitting issues. So just remember that a well-fitting corset, it will only reduce the waist and it will fit just flush against the rib cage and the hips. So as always, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them down below, and I will see you in a few days with another corset review. I'll see you then. Bye.